Gotcha.
Okay.
3-year-old.
Good evening, and welcome to the City of Lebanon Plan Commission meeting, Monday, October 21st. Just make a quick announcement here. If you plan to speak on docket items this evening, if you'd please sign in over here at the door. And when you come up to speak, if you would give us your name and address, it would be most appreciative. Kelly, would you call a roll?
Okay. Matt Reynolds.
Here.
Ashley Paddock.
Here.
John Lassley.
Here.
Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Gordon Perry.
Here.
Brian Tandy. Absent. Jane Taylor. Absent. Lori Gross.
Here.
Okay. First item of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was actually July 15th. Everybody had a chance to read them?
Yeah, there should be a correction on docket 19-13. Indicates Chad Kiker, second in the motion. It was actually Brian Tandy.
Okay.
Other than that, it was good.
Anyone else? So we just have,
Just to correct it.
okay. A motion, so
Second the motion is corrected.
I need,
I move to approve the minutes as corrected by Planning Commission member Reynolds.
And I'll second it.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Get rid of this. All right, second, our next item is, here is old business, docket number 19-25. This will include a public hearing. Ben, do you want to walk us through this docket?
Sure thing. So docket number 1925 is a rezone request. The property is located on North Lebanon Street. The property is currently zoned multifamily, and the request is for a rezone to neighborhood business. The current proposal for the property is to construct a two-story office building that would house the consolidated in-well offices, and I'll let the applicant talk a little bit about what in-well is and how they would use the property. But really what the Plan Commission is reviewing tonight is the rezone request from multifamily to neighborhood business. So regardless of the proposed use by the applicant, that is what you're looking for. So that would be any type of use permitted in neighborhood business is something you would be considering appropriate for this property by the rezone request. So if they pull up the computer here, we'll kind of give you the lay of the land here. So what you see here in yellow are the 5 parcels that are part of the rezone request. Directly adjacent to the north here, kind of in the hole that is not highlighted in yellow, is an existing house that's has been rezoned neighborhood businesses and being used by Inwell for some of their services. So they do have some services at the site here, and they're looking to kind of finish the rezoning here to neighborhood business and consolidate all their facilities into a new facility here. So current existing uses, it's vacant property out here on Lebanon Street. You've got some ad hoc kind of gravel / asphalt parking back here to serve existing in-well facility, and the rest of it is vacant. There is an existing public alley that separates these two running north and south. So just some quick petitioner is Andrew Gutwein. He's requesting the rezone from multifamily to neighborhood business to accommodate the construction of a 2-story office building. And the procedural process here, I'll just kind of walk you through it. The Planning Commission is the advisory body, so what you'd be doing tonight is making a recommendation to the Common Council for the rezone. So you'll be making a recommendation. Depending on that recommendation or the outcome of that recommendation, it would be heard as an ordinance request to the council at their next meeting. The only reason it wouldn't be heard at the next meeting is if you don't make a specific decision favorable or unfavorable tonight and it's continued to the next meeting. So in terms of the process, there are 5.
Say that again. Say that last part again, please.
So if for some reason you weren't able to make a favorable or unfavorable recommendation on that and it's continued to the next meeting, that'd be the only reason. But if either favorable or unfavorable recommendation is made, it will be forwarded to the council with that recommendation.
Thank you.
So there are 5 criteria that staff reviews in order to review any sort of rezone application. The first one of those is consistency with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. I did review the future land use map from the Lebanon Comprehensive Plan, and that map identifies this area of Lebanon Street for residential uses and future land use, and you can see we've got a number of residential uses here now. So given the fact that the comprehensive plan recommends a future land use of residential, that would not be consistent with the neighborhood business zoning classification. So staff has found that the subject rezoning to neighborhood business is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Lebanon comprehensive plan. So they haven't necessarily met the first criteria. Second criteria is compatibility with adjacent land uses. The zoning of this property and everything around it is multifamily. Look at existing land uses aside from the existing in-well office. Everything to the north of this property is a single-family residence, either owner or renter occupied. To the east, you have multifamily housing and some single-family. You do have one small Domino's that's located here. To the southeast, that is the one business that's located in this area. To the south is all single-family homes. To the west is all single-family homes. To the north is all single-family homes. So we're somewhat challenged here. Staff has found that the subject rezoning from single-family residential, actually I made a mistake, a typo in the staff report. The subject rezoning to neighborhood business is not compatible with existing uses and zoning on adjacent properties to put neighborhood business in the middle of residential zoning and uses. So they have not met criteria 2. Desirability of the land use, they're proposing the rezone to neighborhood business in order to construct a 12,000 square foot 2-story office building, consolidate in-well functions. Given the adjacent residential land uses, the proposed development or any potential development permitted in the neighborhood business zoning classification, this would represent a much more intense non-residential development pattern than would be desirable adjacent to residential land uses and would have much higher traffic generation during the day than your typical residential land uses. So staff has found that the subject rezoning to neighborhood business is not a desirable land use within the proposed area. Impact on property values is the criteria number 4. The change of land use permitted in the neighborhood business zoning classification would allow a variety of non-residential uses at a much higher intensity than is typical in residential areas. The proposal for a 2-story office building is much larger than surrounding residential uses and would have a higher traffic generation than a typical residential use. This type of land use change theoretically could have negative impacts on surrounding property values. So staff has found that the rezoning neighborhood business could have a negative impact on property values in the area. And criteria number 5 is responsible growth. Excuse me. The rezone to neighborhood business would represent a significant departure from the existing residential zoning classifications in the area. It would not be consistent with land uses in the immediate area. While the site is served by adequate utilities, the proposed land use is much more intense than the existing uses of the site. Staff has found that rezoning to neighborhood business does not represent responsible growth and development. And finally, in summary, staff recommendation and review of the rezoning request to neighborhood business, Lebanon Planning staff recommends that this petition be forwarded by the Plan Commission to the Common Council with an unfavorable recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Ben, if that was developed as multifamily, are we talking about the same type of 2-story structure, number of units, that type of thing?
It theoretically could be, yes.
And the existing utility infrastructure servicing those lots would be sufficient for this development and/or multifamily development?
My understanding is yes, we'd have to talk to them. So the office uses doesn't have a terribly high demand for water, wastewater, whereas the multifamily would. So we would have to have a more specific discussion with utilities about, in particular, the wastewater, the sanitary lines in that area to make sure that there's not any issues. As many of you are aware, we have a lot of old clay tile sanitary lines in this area still, some of which have been lined to help with infiltration, some of which have not. So we'd need to have a more specific discussion with them to understand if there is sufficient capacity for a multifamily use in this area before suggesting that there is.
Questions for Ben?
And do we have any idea how long this property's been vacant? I don't remember any structures that I can
I
recall.
don't. The applicant may be able to, may have better history on that, but it's been vacant for some time.
I mean, I think was the parking lot has been there since Tansel's Market.
Yeah,
Across the street.
it's been at least 25, 30 years.
Okay.
We'll have the applicant fill you in on that question here in a second when you call them up.
Thank you.
I guess just for the benefit of the other plan commission members, we do not have a site plan as proposed for the site. This is just a rezone at this time, so.
Yeah. There was a conceptual site plan included in your application, but you're not reviewing that specific site plan. If rezoned to neighborhood business, any use permitted in neighborhood business would be, at that time, permitted here. That was just a concept that was shown to give you an idea of what they're thinking about right now. If the rezone theoretically was approved, they would have to come back for development plan review for the plan commission.
Can you go back to the graphic that you showed the property? I want to say when this came up previously, there was a parcel of land on the south side of Chicago Street. The old, there's an existing building there. I thought that was part of this development.
They were proposing to remodel the old market store here on the south side and use it for some offices. That facility is not large enough for the consolidated services that they're considering now. But they had, that came before the BZA. I can't remember if it was earlier this year or late last year. But yeah, that was a consideration, was for them to be able to put some offices.
So that's not, that's no way related to what's in front of us tonight?
I'm sure it's related because it's all in-well services, so I don't know whether they still intend to use that building for, if this project moves forward or not, or whether it'll all be consolidated to the new facility.
But the zoning that's before us tonight does not include that?
It does not include that parcel, correct?
Okay. All right. No other questions for Ben? I guess we would invite the applicant to step forward and further define.
I need Jerry to tell me the history a little bit. Somebody asked about the date and time. I'm Andrew Gutwein, and Jerry Tansel is in ownership of the ground over here, was in ownership of the former market over here. But as far as dates, Jerry knows it much better than I do.
Okay.
So if you-
Yes, well, you don't see that right now. There were 4 houses on the part that's in the, what would be the southwest corner of the, okay, the larger square, in other words. All of that, I don't remember the exact year, but I'm pretty sure it was between 1960 and 62. There were 4 houses there that were demolished. And then my father owned the grocery store across the street, and he then put the parking lot in, approximately half of it, and then put some trees and grass in the other half. So that was done in 62. The house on Lebanon Street, my wife and I purchased in, I could have looked this up. I think like 1991 or 2, and we tore that house down in, again, I think 98 or 99. It was not in good repair, and we had difficulty getting good tenants in the property. And we just decided that it was not a wonderful house. I'm a fan of old homes and restoring them and keeping them up to date, but that house didn't have great woodwork or great characteristics inside that you would particularly want to save, and so we tore it down in that year. And so that's been all in grass, and I understand the neighbors would like to see that remain in grass and trees, but it's time to put it to another use, and so that's why this project I thought was a great one for the neighborhood. So I think that answers your question on timing. The only other thing I'd like to say is that for neighbors and everybody, that I got a little confused here in this reading, but it's my impression that it's zoned multifamily, right? Is that not true?
That's correct.
So if this isn't satisfactory, then presumably putting apartments on there would be. And I just felt, I was happy to find this buyer because I felt the neighbors are going to love this. If we put a bunch of apartments on there, and I don't know how many we could get on there, I think easily 15 and maybe 20, but you're going to have 20 cars, or perhaps 40 if everybody had 2 cars. That wouldn't be the case, but say 30 cars coming in and out every day of that parking lot, and then staying there overnight, being there on weekends, being there on holidays, and a lot more in and out and potential problems in terms of trash and so on in the neighborhood, in the parking lot, versus this medical facility, which has, you know, professional business, professional clients, and people that come in and leave, and that on weekends and evenings and holidays, there basically would be no cars, or 1 or 2 or 3 cars, not 30 or 35 or 25 in there. So I felt that it was a good fit for the neighborhood, as far as the fact that with the present zoning, I couldn't even build single-family homes in there without requesting a zoning change. But anyway, those were just my thoughts, that I thought it was real good, and obviously it's not what I think, it's what you all think, and the neighbors and so on. But that's all I have to say for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, so Jerry touched on it just a little bit. So the, across the street that you'd asked about, the Old Tanzels Market, that was given a variance, BZA. So we did pull a permit, and working on converting that to office use. So that will, if this project doesn't go forward, that will remain that use at that site. So right now, we do have NB, neighborhood business, at the facility that's open on Lebanon Street, and then we'll have the facility that's open on Chicago Street, the way that's currently configured. If that answers that part of that question.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks. Jerry's point, the traffic generation that we'll do at a facility like this will be a lot of 9 to 5, 9 to 6 p.m. So it won't be a 24-hour location that's servicing clients 24 hours a day like an apartment complex would. So your traffic, evening and weekend traffic, is greatly reduced compared to what a multifamily setup would be. And then the building, I think a lot of you have been around a little bit. The Cummins facility that we did, my primary focus on what I do is in medical-related properties, so the Cummins facility. Okay. So the Cummins facility down on the south side by the fire station is one that actually the group that's here with Inwell was involved with. We did for Cummins down there. So if you've seen that brick building down on the south side, that you know, we try to fit it into, you know, a high-end building that's fitting of the neighborhood as well. So that would be the ultimate goal. I guess any questions I can answer for anybody?
Questions from the council?
I know we're not debating a site plan, or not debating, but considering a site plan, but is the consideration for the existing home that Inwell's operating out of to remain, or will that disappear and the entire two blocks be repurposed?
Well, it's the south half of that block.
Yeah.
Those 2 sections. And so the back of it will remain, part of that's in floodplain, so that'll just remain parking. So really you can't, I mean, even to put a house in it today, you can't put houses back in it. So parking is kind of what you got to do with the back of it. So it's mainly the frontage out on Lebanon Street. And so, yeah, we would, that building's kind of in rough shape. It's, everybody's kind of band-aided it together for years and years, and it's not very practical. So that building would come down.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Other questions from the commission?
What about, I have a question on your clientele.
Okay.
What, you mentioned that they don't have transportation or something?
Well, I think for anybody, that's a consideration. When you get down to a downtown area, that the reason and the focus to stay close to downtown, I've got some maps in here, is try to keep it within a 1 mile distance so people can walk to it. We're doing the same thing no matter what the population or the clientele is, trying to get people to walk to places. And when you get to renters are 8 times more likely to not have a car than homeowners are. And so in some of the older housing areas, we've got a lot more rental properties than home ownership. So it just kind of goes hand in hand to locate services in a central district so that people can walk to it and get to, get to it without an automobile. But as far as clientele and statistics and all, I'd pass that off to Lynette, because she can cover the clientele and so forth, if that would help.
Yep, that would be great.
Is that, anything else I can answer?
Hello, my name is Lynette Clark, and I am the managing member for Integrative Wellness. We are a Boone County-based, community-based, our community-focused practice where we serve a wide range of ages, so from little bitty all the way through geriatric, and a wide range of socioeconomic statuses. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions on the type of clientele that we do have in our business. A lot of them are very, I guess, average citizens as well as professionals. We serve doctors, lawyers, and our first responder community, in addition to a lot of youth. One of my attractions to this actual land, when we had moved into the 610 North Lebanon Street, it was just a vast difference. As Andrew noted, I was part of Cummins when we built the Cummins building, and it is such a barrier for access to services. I cannot emphasize that enough. And a lot of our community health improvement surveys do ask those questions about mental health and addiction treatment, and access to care is one thing that is always noted for this city. So the difference that I noticed was just amazing without even seeing the data that Andrew was able to provide, and that's the most frequented intersection in the city. So that's pretty interesting to me. But not super surprising when I think about my experience. So one thing that in my heart is that, being able to be there for the youth in our community. Unfortunately, some don't have transportation, some do, but some don't have a guardian that is able to bring them to services, and we are that person. So there are 4 schools of the 6 in this community school corporation that are able to access us by walking to our location at 610 North Lebanon. The other thing that I've noted, because my office is currently out at Lakeshore Drive behind Burger King, and even though it's not that, you would think, not that much further down the road, when there are crises, when somebody is feeling suicidal and they need to get in, it is more often that they can access that 610 location versus coming to the Lakeshore for various reasons. And I'm, constantly juggling schedules, trying to get a therapist down there. But with the house being fairly small, it's also then becomes a game of how I can fit them in the house as well. So just really needing, in order to appropriately service our community, more space. We do employ 72 individuals, most of them all here in Boone County. And I will say proudly that people have moved to this city in order to be a part of our team, and I am very proud of that. We've tried to build a really great culture for our clients, but also for our employees, and we want to be a good partner in the community in every way possible, and that includes being a good neighbor. One other thing that I thought I'd mention about our business that may or may not be worth sharing right now, I'm not sure, but is that we are a for-profit. We will be paying taxes on the property, so I think that sometimes my understanding is that kind of comes into play in these types of scenarios. But yeah, the main desire is just that access to care. I don't know how much people know about our business, but we also partner with many, like the schools, the hospital, but another one is Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center, and they are a practice that does do forensic interviews for youth who have been allegedly abused in some fashion. We currently co-locate with them in one of our locations around town, and they are considering if we get a walkable location, they really would like to move in with us because their current facility is kind of not what it is. So our current plan that we've worked on with Andrew does include them, and so I'm hopeful that if we can get some better, or some good access to care and a nice new building, that we will be able to continue those partnerships and be able to service this community. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more about who we serve and basically everybody and what we do.
So you mentioned your other sites. So the one, I know that there's the one behind Burger King, Sylvia's, the old hospital. There's multiple sites in town. Would you be trying to consolidate all those into one spot?
Yes, that is correct. One, again, everybody to have that same access. I think that's the biggest thing, but it will obviously create some efficiencies for us. We would still continue, we do co-locate with Mental Health America of Boone County, and we provide the day reporting center. That will continue to be in Pascal Fettig's building, which is just down the street, just a matter of doors as well. So it's very convenient, very walkable in between locations. But we would continue to operate that there because we have a kitchen facility and just things that the youth can utilize there.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to speak on this agenda item or docket 1925, we would invite you to sign in and come forward and pass along your comments.
Good evening. My name's Paul Cruz. I live at 628 North Lebanon Street, which is in the north end of that block on Lebanon Street. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank the city and your efforts for everything you've done in our community in the last 15, 20 years, 10, 15 years. I'm very excited about the progress we're making. I also want to thank Inwell. I know they provide a lot of great services to our community as well as other communities. I know it's a good facility. It's a good organization. I know that. I've looked on their website. I know they treat the full gamut of healthcare needs, addictions, abuse victims, abuse perpetrators, child abuse victims, child abuse perpetrators, sex offenders, family counseling, and the whole gamut of mental disorders. And certainly, I'm thankful for their presence. But it's a business, and this is a residential neighborhood surrounded by single-family homes. And it is not an appropriate use. I appreciate Ben's input. Who would think that somewhere along the way somebody wrote a book about the appropriate uses, and it fails on 5 out of 5 criteria. And so I therefore hope that you follow that recommendation as a business use. I realize it could be something else, and if you don't approve it or the next level doesn't approve it, we still face a multifamily use. Well, that's what it's zoned for. You'll have to see what that brings up. I love Jerry. Jerry's a friend. I loved his dad maybe even more. Boy, I wish you'd fix up that old building on the south side of Chicago Street and bring back Tanzel's Market. But it isn't going to come. I walked over there every night for 10 years when I first moved into my home, and boy, it was a treat. We're a neighborhood. We're full of proud homeowners. If you look up and down Lebanon Street and East Street, people are taking the time to fix up their homes. The house across the alley from the existing building, a young couple with their high school daughter has spent hours and money on restoring and fixing up and maintaining their home. If you haven't driven by my house lately, you've missed whatever I did last year. John's property across the street from me. What a great job, John. In a residential community, in a neighborhood of families. The people behind me, Brian Oniger behind me across the alley from this parking lot that they're going to put in, have all spent time and effort and money on fixing up their homes. My friends behind me on East Street have done the same. To the to the south of the property along East Street have done the same. It's a neighborhood. We're proud. We're proud property owners in the area, and we want to keep it that way. Any business you bring in is going to have the inevitable change, maintenance issues, trash dumpsters in the parking lots, people in and out, whether it's 9 to 6 or evenings or not. I will say that they're open on Saturdays now. I'm pretty sure they still will be. Traffic patterns is if you haven't, and I know you all have driven on Lebanon Street at the right hours, is a nightmare from my house to the park or from my house to the courthouse. And we're going to be adding to it. I do have apprehensions about safety with any business. I'm not trying to get caught up in hysteria about mental disorder, but any business is going to invite the potential for problems from perpetrators on the outside. My neighbors and I have already had some unpleasant experiences with the people in and out of the existing business. But I do have concerns about those widows, older people, and children that live within that walking distance. I know there's a lot said about the opportunity to walk to this place. The people that are within a 6-block radius or a half-mile radius of this all have cars. They all are going to drive to wherever they're going to go, whether they have a higher likelihood of needing mental health because they're renters, or if they just need it because they are, for whatever reason, they've got a car, they can go to any location. I do agree with Ben's analysis on all 5 criteria. There were some of the things I was mostly concerned about, the impact on a residential area. It's not compatible with our existing uses. It's not the most desirable use of that property in that neighborhood. It certainly is going to have an effect. We're proud property owners. I don't know how far north, but I know on both sides of Lebanon Street, as busy as it is, and you can look at that and say, who'd want to live on Lebanon Street? Well, let me tell you, I love living on Lebanon Street. I know others are, or they wouldn't be fixing up their homes. And yet, if we start a trend of putting businesses along there, good businesses, the homes are going to become rental homes. I'm going to be one of them. There's a good chance I'm not going to live forever, and somebody else is going to turn that into a 4-unit apartment building like the people before me wanted to do. And that's not good in the long run. Is it responsible growth? No. I'm very concerned about its impact on fair market value. It's permanent. I know you can change, but put a building on there, is it ever going to come back to residential? No. It opens the door to others up and down Lebanon Street. It's going to run down over 20 years, not upgrade the existing buildings. All right, well then let's just tear them all down and put a row of businesses all up and down Lebanon Street. The property owner that's there can move. Whatever is built is inevitably going to become somebody else's building, somebody else's issue, somebody else's going to become a landlord someday. In April, before this ever came about, tell you the difference between a business mentality and a residential community mentality. My neighbor next door between me and the Inwell office, he was helping me build a privacy fence, and we'd gone out to Menards and picked up 10 panels of fence on his trailer, and we pulled in on the alley, and we stopped to try to decide, all right, we're going to put them in his garage, we're going to put them in my yard, where we're going to store them. And a woman came out from the office and rolled down the window. She said, I'm in the alley at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, sitting in the truck talking to my neighbor. We're both in the truck. She said, you can't park there. I said, pardon? I said, well, this is our business, and that's our parking, and we have a lot of people that are coming in, and you can't park there. Well, I wanted to say, hi, neighbor. But instead I just said, okay. And we pulled down. The engine was running. I was stunned. Now, that's okay. She probably had problems with people parking there. I understand there may be reasons, but no, I don't. I hope they do something in town. I'm very much hopeful that they can build this structure on it or move into another existing structures here in our community that are empty at the present time, are bare land at the present time, or are available for lease at the present time, because I'd be happy to have this organization have that kind of a facility, consolidate services and the like. but not on Lebanon Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
I'm going to ask that future comments, we're not trying to limit anybody from comment or stopping anybody from commenting, but I need to, for a time's sake, your comments will be limited to 3 minutes, would be very helpful. And anyone else?
Since if this project doesn't work, I've got to think about what I do next with my land. I guess my question would be to the neighbors and to the board. If we have a multifamily project in, is that going to be acceptable, or is that going to be not acceptable because it's not single-family homes? It's zoned multifamily, so my understanding, you can't build single-family homes in there. Is that right?
Ben, you want to, I'm going to defer to you on that one. Ben?
Quick answer real quick.
Yeah.
The multifamily zoning district does not permit single-family homes. In fact, the Board of Zoning Appeals has had a number of cases this year where somebody has requested a use variance to allow their single-family home to remain in the multifamily districts. So there's a zoning history that I could explain, but we don't have time for it tonight.
Okay.
And I don't want to take more of your time. I'm just asking this question because I'm puzzled a little bit. That I understand what Paul Cruz is saying about their neighborhood and how they feel about it, but it's going to change, and I still am not quite sure why they'd rather have 15 or 20 apartments with the cars that would bring and the in and out at all hours of the day and night, and every one of them different in terms of their responsibility and how they act versus this. So, you know, that's my only point of question is I'd like some clarification. Paul and I can talk about this later, how he would feel about that. But it seems to me that the only alternative I have is to seek an apartment builder to be able to use this land the way it stands. And we felt this was a reasonable use that's close to that, but more attractive than that. So that's all. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you want me to sign in? I sign in afterwards. I'm Pascal Fittig. I'm president of Mental Health America. I just want to say that Inwell provides a much-needed service that the community is continuously asking for. They provide a service and easy access if they can consolidate. The aesthetic of the buildings they're proposing to build on there is going to bring improvement, in my opinion. It's not going to be any different than the flats just right down the road. I appreciate what Mr. Cruz is saying, but the clientele that's going to be utilizing that facility is no different than the clientele that goes to Tosh, that goes to Domino's, and that also goes to an attorney's business right down the road. They all need services, and they need easy access for these much-needed services in our community.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience interested in speaking about this docket? If not,
I got a quick question for Ben. Ben?
no. If there's no one else that wants to speak in the public hearing, I will close the public hearing, end of the meeting. Okay.
Just a quick question, Ben.
Yes, sir.
What is the zonage for Domino's there?
That's also zone multifamily. So that building has been there for decades. It's a gas station a long time ago. So it's considered a legally existing non-conforming use in the multifamily.
And what about Tosh?
He either got his property rezoned or a use variance. He was in front of some board to get that approved. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Way north, yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Other questions for Ben?
Thank you.
So I'll just reemphasize, just before you continue discussion, we're not necessarily considering whether the in-well use of this property is appropriate or not. It's whether the neighborhood business zoning classification is appropriate for this property or not. There are 50 other uses that could be permitted here if you rezone it, and for example, in-well decides that this isn't the appropriate site. There are a number of other commercial uses that would be permitted here if, under a neighborhood business zoning classification. So that's what you're reviewing tonight, is whether neighborhood business is appropriate zoning, not the validity of in-well's proposed use for the site.
And I'd like to follow up Ben's comments with the commission is, we're looking for either a favorable or an unfavorable decision to pass on to the Common Council. It's not deciding whether it is or it isn't. It's the commission's position to the Common Council. Okay? Any questions about that? At this time, then, I would entertain a motion for the rating to pass on to the Common Council.
I'll make a motion to forward the rezoning request to neighborhood business to the Common Council with an unfavorable recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second for an unfavorable rating to the Common Council. Kelly, would you take roll?
Matt Reynolds,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
John Lastly,
Abstain.
Evan Krulik,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Gordon Perry,
Yes.
Brian Tandy, Lori Gross.
Yes.
Commission will pass an unfavorable rating consistent with the finding from the City Planning Department.
I'll just reiterate for those in the audience, this will be at the council meeting for a first reading or first discussion at their next council meeting, which would be next Monday evening.
Okay. New business, docket number 1926, Ironman property, recommendation to the Common Council for an alley vacation. The property is located at 315 North Lebanon Street. Ben, would you walk us through the rest of this, please?
Sure, absolutely. So what's before you tonight is an alley vacation request. The actual alley vacation action item will be done by the Common Council, but this is one of those where this also comes to the Plan Commission for a recommendation before it goes to the council. So it also allows staff to discuss this with any of our utility partners to make sure that's not causing any conflicts with any utilities that may be in the area. So we have done that. So if they pull the computer screen up again on the overhead, we can kind of walk you through where we are, because I know there was some confusion as to exactly what portion of what alley was being discussed tonight. So as you can see here, the request for the vacation is associated with this section of an old north-south alley right-of-way. As you can see here, the actual alley itself doesn't function as an alley anymore. It's actually primarily the parking spaces associated with Memory Hall and the flats, and partially the sidewalk. So those improvements were made in the early 90s, so this hasn't actually functioned as an alley for 20-plus years. The only potential conflict, which is easily solved, is there is a sanitary sewer line that runs north and south through this alley. Lebanon Utilities indicated that they would be comfortable with the alley vacation as long as it was immediately replaced with a utility easement in its place, which we're already working to get those documents put together as well. And one of the conditions on the recommendation from the Planning Commission would be that would take place at the same time, that the easement we recorded at the same time or prior to the vacation documents being executed. So as you can see here, that was really, it does not impact any of the other alleys that are still active. You can see here to the east, west, and north, south, further to south. Those are still active public alleys. Those will remain. This request is only impacting this short segments here outlined in yellow, that it was still a public right-of-way, but has not been used as a public alley for 20-plus years. So Happy to answer any questions. Just for the record, the staff recommendation and review the submitted request. Staff recommends forwarding the alley vacation request to the Common Council with a positive recommendation contingent on the following condition, and I mentioned already, that the applicant record a utility easement with the same limits as the current alley right-of-way prior to execution of the alley vacation documents. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions for Ben? I have a couple, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Seeing as how it's property. So the easement, an easement would be same size, same area. Our utility, Lebanon Utilities is good with it.
Yes. Yeah, and in
Access.
fact, the applicant already had a legal description drawn up for this segment of the alley right-of-way. So we already have the legal description written for the utility easement documents. So we're all set to get that done.
Okay. Obviously, it's not working as an alley now, but access for emergency vehicles, EMS, fire, whatever, that's all taken care of in what's been developed, and
Correct.
there's access, we're not restricting anything, there's nothing.
You couldn't physically use it now, so we're not restricting any of their access. I know our fire department says that they don't like fighting fires from alleys anyway. In fact, this is probably a better scenario for them because they could fight it from the parking lot, or they would be out on a public street. So again, you couldn't physically use the alley as an alley right now anyway. It's not providing any access to EMS or fire or police now, so that the ability to use this property won't change post-vacation.
And the easement document, the recorded easement document would prohibit any development over that sanitary sewer, correct?
Yes, it typically would. So, and you have utility easements that run through improved areas all over the place, but we're really trying to avoid putting a building over top of it, yeah.
So the parking lot configuration and what's there now doesn't pose, it doesn't appear to impose any unnecessary hardship to that infrastructure.
Correct, correct. If our utility company needed to do work on that sanitary sewer that required them to dig it up, they'll be able to dig it up regardless of what's there right now.
Okay. Any other questions for Ben? The applicant like to step forward and tell us more about this?
Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. This is another public hearing, so anyone that in the audience that has comments about this docket number, this easement, please feel free to step forward and sign in. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this public hearing. Joyce Douglas, 409 North Meridian Street, 30-year Lebanon resident. And I just wondered why we're having this meeting, because he already converted the alley to his parking. And when I went up to the planning department, spoke with the secretary, she said, well, we're having this public meeting because paperwork was missing. And it was a long time ago. Paperwork's not missing. I purchased this from the clerk's office back a long time ago, exactly 5 years. It has all the recorded information from the BZA meeting where we all had a public hearing, we all got up to talk. We all got up to, he The developers got up and explained what they wanted to do with the property. I also have photos I can show each and every one of you of what the parking lot looked like before, which was not that long ago, again, 5 years ago. BZA denied their variance request. Then the former mayor held a pizza party. Then the following month, it was a revised plan, which ended up being the exact plan, which by rule, by code, you're not supposed to hear another meeting like that for 12 months, but it was all rushed through. I have photos that, again, I can show you of the alley 5 years ago. It was an alley, straight even with the courthouse. So I believe we're holding this public hearing because something happened to this and from the clerk's office, and I don't know what happened to the paperwork involved when they approved him to dig up the entire parking lot for the flats in back of Memory Hall Senior Housing. That's when the alley changed. And it wasn't that long ago. It was 5 years ago. So again, I'd like to ask the developers to answer why we're here, why there wasn't a vacation of alley, I guess, done by the former Mayor Huck Lewis. I guess there was some improper methods of how you approved things 5 years ago at the BZA. Of course, most of you are all new to this board. But I also have to ask the planner, how does he not know what happened 5 years ago and what records are missing from that office and why? And I got my public notice for next time for Memory Hall to be changed from senior to where he doesn't have the seniors living there, and that's already been played out here too. And I have that paperwork, and I have the pictures of the community senior housing sign down, and I just am a little confused. So I would like to know the answers to my questions tonight, please, before you decide anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes. What is,
Would any of you like to see the pictures?
sure.
Pass them through.
Yeah. So I'll ask for him to come up next. Okay. Okay. Anyone else wishing, while we're looking through these pictures, anyone else wishing to comment on this docket number?
Hi, my name is Paul Van Clay, live at 404 North Meridian. I was also at the January 2015 meeting. During that meeting, I mentioned what allocation for the gymnasium itself, for the stands and the gymnasium floor, what allocation for the parking. That was never addressed. Since that time...
One second. you're going to be heard. I don't want people to be. Can we just pass then?
After, can we go on?
Yeah. Good. I don't want to see him. Okay.
With discussion. To be really public and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
And
For the,
sir, could I, when you...
we'll get him to restart here in a
Okay.
second.
Yep. I didn't catch his name yet.
For the record, the pictures that Ms. Douglas provided shows the original configuration of the parking lot with the alley going straight through, and then reconstruction of the parking lot. So we've seen the alteration. Okay, now, sir, can I
Sure.
ask you to start again so that we're not,
Okay.
because I want to make sure that we all hear your comments. Thank you.
My name is Paul Van Clay, live at 404 North Meridian. I have concerns of parking from the Flats location. I was at the January 2015 meeting where the parking requirements were computed. There was no mention of what parking spots were required for the gymnasium. Since that time, I learned that there was a previous council meeting or a city meeting about parking at that location in September of '94. And I did get a copy of not the minutes, but the proposed itinerary. And they were allocating 25 spaces for the gymnasium. And it was mixed between the offices that were in now they're apartments. During the day, they would be used by offices. And then when they weren't used in the evenings and on weekends, those 25 spaces would be allocated to the gymnasium. So that was never put into the computation for the 2015 allowance. So there is no allowance for any parking when the gymnasium is used. How often is the gymnasium used? That'd be a good question for the property owner. But there's classes going on Saturday mornings, and on evenings, there's basketball games. The issue is kind of compounded by parking spots. If you want to get parking spots at the apartments, you have to pay for them. And I think it's $40 a month. Is that right? Yeah, reserved parking spots are $40 a month. If you don't want to pay that, you park on the street. So the city computed you need to require X amount of parking spots, but yet the apartment owner is charging extra to park on those allocated parking spots, which also happen to be in the city's right of way. So the apartment owner is now, and has been, getting money for people parking on city property. So it just kind of builds up an older property. You get an exemption or a variance. They just keep building up upon one another. And I'm proposing to you, before you allow this vacation of the property, we need to look at the number of parking spots required for those buildings and how they're treated. You can't say you need that X amount of parking spots for residents and then go around and charge them for it. Because people that can't afford it will just park in the street, and that affects all the other homeowners. That's all I brought today.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Yep.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this docket number? Yeah, limit it to 3 minutes, yes.
I also want to say that piggybacking to Paul Van Clay's comments, that I went to the mayor's office and to the planning department. He was also counting the public street parallel parking facing North Meridian. And there were little signs, which I have pictures of, I can show you, that he put up saying, this is private property and you will be towed if you don't have a sticker. That was illegal, and those signs came down within 2 days, and I really appreciated that from the planning department. The other thing is, he's got a 10-year tax abatement, and he is leasing or trading or doing something with parking abutted up to the back of the businesses on the square. He has signs up. Dr. Lacey Boggs, used to be the jail distillery, and St. Adrian's Market. And he has private parking for them. Now, everyone knows the downtown parking code. It's half of a spot. So with charging $40 a month, leasing out these private spots, trying to take city property and make them his spots, what do you think that does to the neighborhood? It overflowed, just like we predicted, onto the streets. Then the county employees who used to park in those spots now had to park along the square. And now the businesses on the square have less spots. And it's just a domino effect. And I would like you to consider all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would care to speak in a public hearing on this item? Nobody else stepping forward. I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the meeting, and I would invite the applicant to step forward with it, if they want as a rebuttal.
I have no rebuttal, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you have about anything that you've heard. Anything that's relevant to the matter at hand.
I don't know if this question is specifically for you or if the planning department could answer better. Obviously, at some point, somebody thought this vacancy had already occurred. Otherwise, I wouldn't think that as a property owner and developer would build property on this, knowing that it was still city property. So I'm asking, was that an oversight somewhere throughout the planning process? Not being on the board then, I don't know.
I will try to answer that question.
Okay.
So some history about the property.
Mr. Sandry and
Can I stop you for 1 second and
Sure.
just have you state your name so we get that on the record? And then,
Thank you, Mr.
And then
Perry.
answer the question, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Joe Blake. I am one of the owners of Ironman Properties, along with my partner who's with me here tonight, Mike Sandry. A little bit of history about the property, if I may. In 1996, the city cooperated with a gentleman by the name of Leo Stens to redevelop the property as Memory Hall. It was developed as low-income housing using tax credit dollars, and it was developed into 59 units, all contained within Memory Hall. At the time, the gymnasium was used, and there was a fitness center down below that many of you remember. There was also office space down below. When the property was redeveloped in 1996 is exactly when these improvements went into the alleyway. There are electric transformers that are sitting in the alleyway today that went in 1996. There are trees and parking and islands, landscape islands, that are in the alleyway that went in 1996. There's a sidewalk that's in the alleyway right now that went in 1996. When Mike and I redeveloped the property, when we added the flats properties in 2014-15, we agreed with the city that the downspouts that came off of the gymnasium were tied into the sanitary sewer system. We voluntarily agreed to separate those sewers and tie those downspouts into the storm sewer and get them out of the sanitary sewer. In the process of doing that, we tore up this alleyway that we're talking about right now. And because we did that underground work, we re-poured the sidewalk and the curbs and the asphalt in the alleyway. That's the history. As to why this was never vacated, I honestly cannot answer that question. This happened in 1996 when Leo Stens initially developed the properties. When we bought the property, we bought it in foreclosure. When you buy a property in foreclosure, you do not get to open the box and look inside and do all of the due diligence that you would normally do on a piece of property. So we bought this piece of property with the alleyway not vacated. Every time we now talk to our bank, they ask us the question, show us a survey, which we do. And guess what's on the survey? The alleyway. Why is the alleyway in the middle of your property, Mr. Blake? Well, because it was never vacated. So that, Commissioners, is exactly why we're talking about this tonight. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you would have for me.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Ben, I know you left, came back with a folder, and I know that I have questions, so, but
I just wanted to, there was a comment made that this alley was changed in the last few years. This is hard to see because it's old aerial photography and the cameras used back then weren't as good, but this is aerial photography from 1998, and you can see the improvements were in place. Mr. Blake just said they were made in 1996. This would support that in 1998. These improvements, both the parking spaces and the curb and sidewalks, were in place in 1998. So the improvements were made a long time ago, almost 20 years ago, or a little over 20 years ago. And that alley should have been vacated at that time, but was not. That predates most of us here, including the applicant. It just was never vacated. And so one of the speakers suggested that there was paperwork missing. I think what Christie meant is that we have no paperwork that a vacation was ever done. That's the paperwork that we don't have. So
that would be the paperwork that Mr. Blake is missing, that he's looking for too.
Yeah, I was not part of the conversation. I don't know exactly what was said, but the only thing we're missing is any record of an alley vacation. We have all the records associated with the BZA and Plan Commission discussions. Was in fact reviewed them last week just to understand all the history associated with this. So yes, this has not functioned as an alley since 1996. It's been private improvements since then. We have all the paperwork associated with the Board of Zoning Appeals applications that were made.
Ben, can you, maybe for the rest of the commissioners, the picture that you have, 1998, 96, right?
Yeah.
That one. Okay. So we see improvements there. Can you show us the picture that is part of the packet that
Yeah.
you started with, please?
They pull up the computer screen. So the improvements are extremely similar to what you saw in 1998. They've obviously been redone, so there's some utility work done. The difference here is that this is not all in parking lot anymore.
Was that, those two different pictures, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Is this part of that flats construction?
Yes, this building that you see here is one
Right,
of the flats
but
buildings.
this, what they dug up and all of the, and the pictures that we've seen that Ms. Douglas has put together, was that all part of the construction of the flats, or was that just limited to that easement?
I didn't see the pictures.
Okay,
that
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Douglas
The,
showed.
the construction pictures that she showed were of the flats construction, where they, as Mr. Blake said, reconstructed the parking spaces and the sidewalk that were
Okay.
adjacent to the Memory Hall building and the gym area. And for those of us, many of us I know have lived in town for a long time, remember the gym and remember the Lebanon Sports and Fitness Center that used to operate there. And you may recall that there were parking spaces where you parked directly perpendicular to that gym. So it was those parking spaces that were evidently built in 1996 within the alley easement that were then reconstructed in 2014 to provide for utility work. So I think I would agree with everything that the petitioner said and that Ben said. We're not missing any records. The only thing, if we're missing anything, and maybe it never happened, was there should have been an alley vacation done prior to 1996 when those parking spaces were built. We don't have any record that one was ever vacated. It's not to say it didn't happen, we just don't have any record of it. So if there's anything missing, to better characterize that, we just don't have any documentation that any alley vacation ever happened. All this is trying to do tonight, in my opinion, is correct something that should have been corrected in 96 or could have been corrected in 14, but I think there was some assumption on the part of the Ironman project that alley was no longer there, as there was already parking spaces and private improvements built across the alley. I don't know if that helps to clarify some positions here, but.
So other questions for Ben? So before us, Ben, is this vacation that appears to be long overdue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not shorting the city out of an asset property.
No.
We're not restricting our utilities, our emergency vehicles, personnel. Is it, I don't see it, maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but I don't see it providing any addition to the property owner. The spaces, the conversation about the spaces for the gymnasium and along the street right away, while there could be issues there, that has nothing to do with what's before us tonight.
Correct.
For a favorable or unfavorable review to the Common Council, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I will ask again the commissioners if you have any other questions for Ben. If not,
Mr. Perry, may I make one more comment?
Okay.
yes.
Would that be appropriate?
Yes, I would, yes.
I know that you don't know me, and you probably don't know when I'm a little worked up, but I'm a little worked up right now. And it's not about me, it's about the insinuations that were made tonight about impropriety on the part of prior leadership of this city, that somehow people slinked around and they cut rules and they didn't do the right thing and they snuck this through in the dark of night. The only thing that was controversial about this, it was unanimously approved. If you go back and look at the records, it was unanimously approved through every approval process until we got to the tax abatement. and to insinuate that either I or the leadership of this city at the time would do something that was improper, frankly, is offensive to me. And if you believe everything that was said tonight, and I know you don't, because you're smart people, I just want you to judge carefully what you heard. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, all we're looking for tonight from the commission is either a favorable or an unfavorable, I want to say rating, but I'm not sure, recommendation to the common council about vacating the alleyway in place of an easement. And please pay particular attention to the recommendations that the city staff has had about the easement being put into place prior to the vacation.
That's part of the vacation.
I will move pursuant to docket number 19-26 that we forward this to the city council with a favorable recommendation for the vacation of the alley as proposed, subject to a easement that is to be dedicated to account for public utility interests within the existing alley corridor that is to be vacated.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, but I would actually like to make a revision to your motion. I would want to see that easement recorded and not just drawn up. It needs to be recorded so that we don't prolong, we don't switch a vacation that didn't happen with a document that didn't get recorded for the easement, which puts the city at risk.
Yeah, I will revise my motion to include that the easement dedication that I referenced be dedicated and recorded prior to the vacation of the alley.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Kelly?
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock?
Yes.
John Lastly?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Gordon Perry?
Yes.
Lori Gross?
Yes.
We will pass a favorable recommendation on to the city common council. Any other business for the commission this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for attending this evening. Our next meeting, Kelly, November 18th. The Plan Commission will meet on Monday, November 18th. I thank you for your time.